What I wanted to do is to go to page 7 of the handout. So we got Hector, can you give this little one to just finish? We got all the way to here. So what is where I'm going to continue from is learning to apply the rotation and the in and out to music. So we're up to the point where we talked about turning in one piece, then how to begin to apply that to music is where we are now. So we have learned to do 5 fingers up and down in both hands. We've learned to do a scale. Everything is ready now, in a way. It's been minimized to start to apply it. And this is where, the reason why we want to talk about this is because everything could be done extremely well up until this point. And then things can go very south. Because applying to each person means something different to each person. So some people will not apply it in a way that it really supports playing in a new way. Some people, it will just be their old tapes of how they see music as music, something to play through. You also have to realize we come from a very long tradition. I don't know about your experience, but my experience, a lot of people that I've talked to in conservatories, music schools, have a similar experience. The expectation of what a good piano lesson means is coming in and playing your piece. And sometimes you sit at one piano and the teacher sits at another and you play through the piece. That's an expectation of a piano lesson. And then there becomes a discussion about this should sound like this should sound like this. But you are a good student if you present a performance on certain sets of a piece. Now you might drudge through the piece beginning to end, but you are going to make it to the end because that was the assignment. So that doesn't necessarily change just because you taught someone to rotate and go in and out on 5 fingers in the scale. They immediately are presented with music, and that tape is very, very strong. So I think it's important to discuss it with the person, that this should look very different when we start to do this. So basically, you've been working on white keys, and you're now going to what we're going to use, the B-flat sonata. You can say that we're just changing the scenery. We're just using different notes. We're doing the same activity, but we're just using different notes. The more you can get them not to go into play mode at the beginning of the application, the more successful the whole thing is going to be. So the important thing is also, we talked about assessing the student and figuring out where the student really is. But after you do that, you can kind of have more freedom to pick a level appropriate piece. So what do I mean by that? You don't want to give somebody a piece to learn how to rotate on that the piece itself is too advanced for them. It doesn't make sense because the challenges of reading, of rhythm, will supersede any attention that they can give to the actual technique. So you want something level appropriate. So even if it's a short 1 little page piece that has maybe 1 scale in it or everything in 5 fingers, that's better than to throw somebody into, particularly this piece we're going to discuss today. This would be more for an advanced person with reading skills, that are up to that level. Very, very important to match it to the level appropriate things. When you do that, it's very important not to as much as possible, not present it as a piece of music. So I have some suggestions for that. For some people, it will be enough just to say we are only going to work on the 16th notes. For other people, no matter how much you say that, they cannot hear it because they see it as a piece of music, they hear it as a piece of music, and it therefore should be played through. So sometimes what's very helpful is to Xerox the piece and cut it up. Cut it up into little passages so they don't see it as a piece. And then paste the passages on a piece of paper and teach it from there. It's much less emotional for the person to relate to a series of lines than to see actual printed music. That is very triggering. It was so funny. I thought this morning, I was laughing with Christina. I thought, we don't realize sometimes how triggered back to old experiences students get just by things that we take for granted, So this morning I was laughing with Christina. I put on here, I put quiz today. And you would have that experience. Everyone would have their experience like, quiz today. Well, what does he mean? What am I going to have to do? It's up, and students go through that on the bench when you say, okay, now here's your piece to rote. We're going to learn the rotation. They're like, what do I do? This is a piece of music. It's like it's very, very overwhelming. So the more you can kind of soothe that aspect of the overwhelm, the more successful the situation might be. Okay. I highly recommend in your first pieces to actually put all the fingering in for a student. Don't leave that to chance. It's not making them dependent at the beginning. It's just very, very good to put in all the fingering. And actually, I got that from Alicia De La Rocha many, many years ago because I was reading an article, and she said the first thing she does when she starts to learn a piece is she puts every finger in. So I thought, well, if she needs it, then I do too. So I started doing that, and then it was interesting because then I started realizing things about the rotation that relate very much to fingering, which is what we're going to get into. So putting the fingering in is very, very important. It is really my goal and my commitment to teach students to be independent by giving them the tools to analyze the single and double rotations in single note playing. So you have to make a distinction in your mind. There's the way this works theoretically for single note playing. So what we're doing today is for single note playing. It does not include rotation for chords, octaves, intervals. Just single note playing. But if you can even get that much cleared up for a person, expanding into octaves, intervals, it's much easier. Much, much easier, because that's a little bit less complex. So we're going to talk this morning about single note playing. Okay, analyzing the single and double rotations. The first thing I have to say is that there will be people who do this in a completely intuitive way. Okay? So what they do is they learn to do the rotation on the scale. They learn to time it properly. Remember, that whole tape on the double rotation, how to time the double rotation, is crucial. And they will continue to apply it exactly like that to a score. Okay? In my experience, I have found it to be actually quite rare that a person doesn't alter something when they go to apply it. So that's why instead of chasing them down the road with this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, I tried to find ways that I could use, obviously, their natural intelligence, their natural curiosity, to help generate and engage them in this process. And I realized that the better they did it, the less I had to work hard. And I liked that. So it was giving them something very empowering, but I wasn't suffering on every note. No, that's not too soon. All with it. Chasing them down. I have an image in my head that I try to relate to. It has two hamsters in a cage. And I am chasing the hamster. When I feel I'm chasing the hamster, I know I'm not teaching well. I know I haven't given the student a thing of value. I'm just chasing them, correcting as we go. And there's nothing that's being left over there in the student's world that helps them go home and recreate the experience. So that's what I'm trying to do, is to show you how you can take a little bit of time out, almost like, like a little study group kind of thing, and do this process with people. So I'm not saying that it has to be done. This is not like, now the rules are you have to do this. If you find it useful, experiment with it. If you find it useful, use it where you think it's appropriate. Okay, the purpose is to really make sure the timing of the single and the double are well done. One of the biggest failures that we have in the rotation kind of disappearing, so to speak, when people go to play, is because the single and double relationship gets corrupted. This is really why I'm doing this, because maintaining of the single and double relationship is what creates speed. I always remember when I said to Mrs. Talbot one day, I said, Mrs. Talbot, what makes us go fast? She said, it's the interaction of the single with the double. That creates a certain horizontal momentum system. And that's really what's happening. We have a horizontal momentum system. And just like running has a particular timing, the bouncing of a ball has a particular timing, so does the finger, hand, and arm as it moves horizontally across the instrument. Now, if you can do that successfully in a scale, that doesn't necessarily mean it remains in the application. Very little can be assumed that it's going to stay the same. So a lot of this is to clear this up and to engage the student and slow them down enough, actually slow them down enough that they can be present to whether they're continuing to do it. And I find that that's a very big factor in having it be successful. Okay. Some students will do this quite intuitively, but don't bank on it. That's all I say. In my experience of teaching advanced pianists, many find this challenging. Some will not want to take the step to think and just do it aspect, may go into overdrive here. Listen, people who have played very naturally for many years, particularly people who become injured, they never really thought about how they played. Okay? When they reconnect to notes that are music, that thing is very strong to play. And the idea that they have to think, I tell you, when I've been in the presence of somebody coming from that particular paradigm and having to think, sometimes there's a huge emotional breakdown. I mean, they really just cannot believe that now they have to think this much to play a scale. They just never had to. So there's a lot to be empathetic with in terms of the person's experience. If this isn't done correctly, the result is what I call generic turning. The motions are there, but they're not timed. That kind of thing. It's just turning, and there's no differentiating between single and double. Because that's how they want to go faster. Do you see? So that's the first thing that gets corrupted is the double. So I really recommend listen to the tape on the double rotation a lot, because the whole thing in this work is so centrally housed in that mastery of the double. Okay. Students can only practice well what is clear to them. Not knowing the relationship of single and double will lead and can lead to sloppy practice. Okay, single note rotation is determined by the succession of fingers played. Therefore, fingering, not melody. That's the first thing to get very, very clearly. Rotation is dependent on fingering. Rotation is not dependent on melody. Okay? We don't have a single rotation every time the melody goes up or down. So it has nothing to do with melodic direction. It only has to do with fingering. Okay? The relationship of single and double rotation is determined by fingering, not by melody. What's the single and double rotation determined by? That's the question.
Fingering.
Fingering. Fingering. Right. So, do you need a piano to figure out what's a single and what's a double?
No.
Piano. You already did away with the piano. All right, we did away with the piano. Awesome. Let's do it. Okay. Now, this is meant to be a little bit humorous, so don't. I'm doing it in this way because it's funny. I have had people where this has not been clear, but I know that it'll be clear for most of you. Numbers go up and numbers go down. I know. Yeah. Just one more time. Numbers go up and numbers go down. Okay. When numbers change direction, that is a single rotation. What does it mean for a number to change direction? If I'm going up in a series of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 2, I just changed direction. I was going up in the numbers, and suddenly the number went down. 5, 4, 3, 4. I was going down. 5, 4, 3. And suddenly I went up. You're laughing now.
That's a lot clearer. That's a lot clearer.
It is, actually. Okay. Just track with me. Track with me here. We have some fun things coming up. Okay. Now we get into how do we actually determine what's single and double. When numbers, using a group of 3 numbers, go in the same direction, the middle number is stopped on. Okay. 1, 2, 3. This is so funny. We joined the corporate world. 1, 2, 3. Okay? We have a group of 3 numbers, correct? That satisfies step 1. Okay? We have a group that's going in the same direction. We're all on the same page there. Okay. Which number are we stopping on?
2.
2. Excellent. All right. Now you have to make a little bit of a conceptual leap. 2 is the note we stop on, which therefore means that 2 to 3 is the double rotation. Is that clear?
Yeah.
So the double rotation is not the X. The X is the note we stop on, producing a double rotation to the next. All right. Very advanced here. Very advanced. All right. But that's
Practically calculus.
practically calculus. Okay. The thumb always plays towards itself. So we have no option there. Okay? So the right hand, it plays to the left. The left hand, it plays to the right. That's a non-negotiable. Okay, good. Now, I would bracket what we just did here. Keep it in your mind. Okay? And let's go to the rule of 3 versus 4. Okay. What is the rule of 3 versus 4? 3 versus 4 helps us do the preparatory motion in single rotation to the second note. Every passage that you begin with always begins with a preparatory motion, correct? But don't you find that people get very confused how to start? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And don't you just keep correcting it? Okay, I hated that. So I came up with this so that I can sit back and have them actually struggle with it. And people will struggle with this, I'm telling you. But it's in the struggle that they will learn it for themselves. Otherwise, what happens is one or two things. Otherwise, intuitively, they will sort it out at some point. It'll get in there. Or they'll actually never really have a preparatory motion, and they'll always have a little bit of difficulty starting. Okay? So how do we do this? Rule of 3 versus 4. Okay. Ideally, here's what you want. You want it to be 3 motions and not 4. Okay? So what does that mean? So if I'm going to start on my second finger, I already have to know what the second note is. So if I'm starting on a G, I'm going to go 2 to 3, and I'm going to go G-A. Okay. So I recommend putting the hand on the piano like this, okay, and saying to the person, you are now neutral. You are neither on the right nor the left. You are neutral. Okay? And we start counting motions, every motion that the person makes. So the first motion is motion number 1. 1. They always play on motion 2. Motion 2 is the motion you play on. 2, 3. Okay? If I turn the wrong way, 1, 2, 3, 4. Without fail, it works every time. So after I do that, I no longer tell people which way to turn. I just make them figure it out. Sit there and figure it out. Sometimes it's agonizing. But that's the only way they're ever going to learn it. Because if it's not clear to them, they can't practice it. And they have to have a way to make it clear to them. So if I'm starting on 5 and I'm going C to B, neutral, 1, 2, 3. Wrong way. 1, 2, 3, 4. If they do it the wrong way, watch out for this too, because they're very smart. 1, 2, 3. They will be right no matter what. So but you get it, right? So it's like, and obviously then what got lost there? What the rotation to the 4 was not correct. It was just on the piggyback of that. Okay. Let's move on. All right, so there are a series of numbers written here.
Sorry, so that's just with a single. You're just talking with a single rotation. With that example, that was just 2 fingers. You're not talking about a double, like a group of 3, right? With this roll.
I'm talking about how to start a passage.
Just starting. Okay.
Yeah, just starting a passage of single notes.
Yes.
Of single notes, not like a chord and then something else. I'm just talking about single notes. Yes?
Especially beginning at the very beginning of the piece as opposed to during the piece after a rest.
Well, wait. Well, yeah. Okay, that's a very good point. Let me clarify something. What I'm really trying to get here is like, what does it look like to start the application of the rotation? So we don't want playing through. So we need a way to start every passage. Now, this brings up a very good point. Whenever you're starting a passage, I would start it like the first note of the piece, as if that was the first note of the piece. It will never, ever be a problem once this gets developed. When they start to go in longer segments, the rotation automatically adjusts. That part is so intuitive. So a place where you might start one way, but if you're coming from the note before, it would go a different way, I would never worry about that. I would just start it as the first note of the piece, and don't worry, you're not ruining the way they play. As soon as they go from the note before, when they have that much experience in the 16th notes, it will instantly calibrate. So does that clear that up? Okay. So let's see. So we have 1, 2, 3. To what? So what are we doing here? We're going up. That's your first group of 3. Then what I suggest doing is start on the next number. Make another group of 3. So what's happening here? This is going up and down. Does anything get an X? No. Start here. This is going 3, 2, 1. Does anything get an X? The 2. Okay. So do you see what we're doing? What you're teaching your student to do is to do this. Do you get that?
I just didn't get why we are doing the middle one. Wouldn't it be confusing for them not to put an X on the 2 first, then put an X on the 2? Number 2. Why? I understand you do it like this. I understand you do it like this.
No, that's
but
not what I'm doing.
Yes, but why are you doing like this?
This is 3 numbers.
Yes.
Then you start here. This is 3 numbers. You start here. This is 3.
Yes, I understand. But wouldn't it be confusing for them when you start from here? You say there is no X's. You don't put any X's because it's a single. But then you put an X here because you're. Why don't you do like 3 then 3? Why is not? Why you don't group it like this, but each?
Yes. Very, thank you. Very good. Yeah. This is the heart of the matter. That ends up being places where it will not be correct. I can think of the number sequence that it will not work in. This works in every number sequence. We're always looking for the common denominator here of what is going to capture the most correctness. Okay? I find that when you do it this way, it's inescapably correct.
Bob, are
Yeah.
you doing that away from the keys, or are you doing that on, so you're not showing them music, you're just showing them numbers?
Yes, absolutely. We're having math class, yes. All right. Now,
One question. If you show them 1, 2, 3,
yes.
and no one knows what happens after 3, what is your basis for putting an X or not putting an X on that 3?
Not on the three.
Well, here's the thing. If this number were 4,
Right.
then in this group, this would have an
No, I'm
X.
just saying if you're breaking it into just a 3-note group, 1, 2, 3, my instinct would be to write an X over 2 and 3, if that's all I was playing.
But that's not the rule. The rule is you have three numbers, and if they go in the same direction, the middle number gets an X.
Okay, I see.
Okay, you are just not
We all laughed
related.
at how easy it is. It's not so easy.
The middle
Yeah,
numbers
it's not so
you
easy.
are checking. Okay. The middle numbers you are checking.
Yes.
Okay, not yet. Even now. Also.
You see, I'm telling you, somewhere in your brain, I'm going to suggest this. I'm just going to suggest this. You are thinking music.
No, you're checking.
You are thinking music, my friends.
Yes.
Don't think music. Think numbers. Numbers. In numbers, you will not get confused. In music, you will get confused. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Save it. Okay, good. Let's do another one. 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. 1, 3, 2. No X. 3, 2, 3. No X. 2, 3, 1. No X. 3, 1, 2. No X.
Here we go.
1, 2, 3. Bingo. Here we go. All right. 2, 3, 4. All right. 3, 4, 1. No. 4, 1, 2. No. 1, 2, 3. Oh, bingo. There we go. 2, 3, 5.
Yep.
So you know what? Wait. Brings me to another point. You do not have to have consecutive numbers. Numbers go up.
Numbers go
Numbers
down.
go down. Hilarious, isn't this? Isn't this really, really, it's priceless, right? We have to really embrace. So look, I struggled with this. I'm telling you, I struggled with this. So we as teachers, I'm telling you, there's a little bit of orienting to this. It's crazy. It's like, can you imagine what it's like for the students? And do you imagine that without this structure, how many people are winging the experience of single and double? It's a complete winging it. And I'm telling you, this will bring the effectiveness of the teaching way into view. Way into view. All right. Let's do another one. Short one. 5, 4, 2, 1. Okay. 5, 4, 2. No. 4, 2, 1.
No, it's 4,
5, 4, 2, 1. Ah, very good. See? Very good. Okay. All right, so you see how that works. But let's check it out in terms of our groups of 3. 5 goes down to 4, down to 2. 4 gets the X. 4 goes down to 2, goes down to 1. 2 gets the X. So if you follow that, it will always be right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Are you having the student do this on paper?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Away from music.
Away from music. I mean, away from music. I mean, why? I tried to do it in music. It didn't work out so well, you know? And then when I started doing this on paper, I really saw how people struggled a bit with it. It is not so easy. It's a certain methodology that you have to kind of get at home with and get some fluency with. Yes.
Are you actually using fingerings from the pieces or just?
Doesn't matter. You have 5 fingers on your hand. Doesn't
And
matter.
they're just putting X's, they're not trying it on a piano yet?
They've got to get this first. Here's why. We're going to go to the last thing I'll show you. Here's why they have to get this first. When you start adding notes to this, it's like adding, gasoline to a fire. If this is not understood, the whole thing blows up. Okay? Why does the whole thing blow up? So I'm going to go fast here, so I'm not going to torture you. Here are some notes. Will someone go to the piano brave enough and do The single and preparatory motion, single rotations, doubles, everything in the right place with those notes. But this is, okay, of course there's the group dynamic. Nobody wants to do something in front of a group and expose himself. But it is a little bit like, wow, this is all new, and I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. But Kathleen's brave. Okay, let's see what you come up with.
It was GFED, right?
GFDC.
GFDC.
Right hand. Beautiful. Okay, stay there. We now have GF D flat D. Same fingering. D flat. You did it very well. Do you see what happened here? How many times do people do that moment incorrectly? Has anybody had that experience? It's one of the hardest things to teach someone to do, right? To do the second finger and the thumb melodically plays higher, right? If it plays melodically lower, people get it. Plays melodically higher, it gets to be a huge confusion. Number, it goes by fingering. Do you see how the relationship of the single and double does not change just because you changed the notes? So that scenario gets worked out, and they have something that they can hang on to work it out. Does that make sense? So that's what I recommend, doing things like this. I gave you the first sheet of the Mozart. We won't have time to do it now, but that's what I would do. If I were presenting it to a student, we would sit, after we do these exercises, and then there's fingering there, and I would just tell them, okay, start putting X's. So if you went to the first 5 notes, you would put an X over the 4, over the 3, over the 2, and therefore they have a roadmap for practicing the rotation. They see the X, they stop. You see, what is not in question now is the movement itself. You've taught them the movement, right? From the scale, you've refined the movement, you've corrected all the problems that there are in the movement itself. The movement is good, but if that movement doesn't get applied rigorously to the score, it's only going to be so good. There's only going to be a general connection of the finger, hand, and arm. It's not going to be laser sharp. And then they see the X's. They have something to do at home to follow that. And they can go and they can do other passages they can do. So I feel like it reduces the amount of incorrectness going on their own. Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes?
Mostly to focus on where the doubles occur,
Where those X's are
so
going to be.
that they're starting to find them and not lose them.
Exactly. And it might be more exciting for the child to say, I know where the single and double is, than for you to keep telling me double is not time 12, it's not time 12, it's not time 12. You know, it's up to them. They can own it more, I think. Questions?
Oh, I just had a comment. I want to say I've done the same on paper and then gone, and as soon as they see notes even, it can go out of their head. So I totally agree. So I've had to go back and forth sometimes with people because
Absolutely.
seeing a page of notes, and these are not, people from conservatories, they just, any student.
I feel like that relationship of the eye to the score is so deep and so wide that you need something collective to bring that focus in. Otherwise, you're really literally correcting every mistake as it comes. And very little of that sticks. Very little of it sticks because it's this time, it's that time, and this is it. So it doesn't have a glue to it, in my opinion. All right, there was another question. Yes.
What's your experience when they see the same number twice in a row in terms of how to apply the rule?
Yeah, I didn't want to get into that. I mean, when you have 2 fingers in a row, it's a double rotation. So the first number would get an X over it. Yeah. There are slight things, but Believe me, start with this and see how far that goes.
You just avoid that as long.
I don't throw it into the mix at the beginning. I let it come up in the music, and then I tell them, okay, this is a repeated finger. People get very confused because they can't distinguish between a repeated figure and a repeated note. Repeated note does not follow the repeated finger rule. Repeated finger is a double. And that can also coincide. You can have a repeated finger on a repeated note. See, that's crazy. A repeated finger on a repeated note, you can have a repeated finger on not a repeated note. A repeated note is
I like that. Okay.
And tell me this isn't hard. And ask me why people have such difficulty maintaining rotation in their playing when they go to a score. It's not a mystery, right? This is not a mystery. It's not so easy. Yes?
Do you apply this to the crossing at first, or do you just do the double three?
Crossing is nothing.
Is it just the same?
No, crossing, yeah. See, see? This is so interesting. Isn't it interesting? How we think, oh, the crossing must be different. No,
To me, it's the
numbers.
same, because you just. it's all
1,
numbers.
3, 2. 1, 3, 2. It's a single. Number went up, number went down.
I do it without the crossing first, without the numbers, but.
Whatever is effective, keep. This is just meant to fill in if people have difficulty understanding how this works. I feel like why this is a little bit of an extension. This is not to make the rotation correct. That work has to be done. That's the physicality. I'm saying that there have been many examples where people could do the scale very well, and then they play a piece and there's no relationship between the level at which they play the scale and the level at which they play the piece in terms of the technique holding. So this is a way that the technique can hold. Okay.